Welcome to the Stormsurf video surf forecast for the week starting Sunday, May 3rd. Looking at significant wave heights for the South Pacific Ocean, we see nothing of particular interest. An area, 20-foot seas, east of New Zealand, pushing northeast, but that will decay to almost nothing by the time it reaches the U.S. West Coast and Hawaii. But if we look at another chart, we can clearly see large swell hitting Central America and Mexico and starting to work its way into Southern California and, believe it or not, even up to Northern California. Surf heights were reported up to 25-foot Hawaiian in Mexico, very large indeed, and also into Central America, large size. This from a storm previously down here in the Central Pacific with up to 54-foot seas last week. That is working its way into California and should peak on Monday. And in fact, here is that storm a week ago on Saturday, developing southeast of New Zealand, working its way to the east, and here it peaked out on about Monday or so. That is 54-foot seas on a very southerly track relative to California, really aimed primarily at Central America and down into Chile and Peru area. Still, large, or at least solid, sideband swell, though a bit not as intense as folks would expect. That is, not a large number of waves per set, and a bit of a wait between those sets for the California area, mainly because most of the energy was pushing this way, and it was only sideband energy pushing north. Still, solid swell should result. Also, a tiny gale developed on just east of New Zealand on Wednesday, building seas up to barely 38 feet over a very small area into Thursday morning, and then proceeded to fade. Small swell is already hitting Tahiti, expected to work its way up into Hawaii, and small energy for the U.S. West Coast next weekend, but we're only talking maybe 2 feet at 16 seconds or so, maybe 3-foot faces, 4 foot at spots with good bathymetry. Now we'll look current time. Let's go up, do our usual analysis, starting up at the jet stream level. Winds about 30,000 feet, help support the formation of storms, and when those storms do form, help direct their track. What we're looking for is a trough, that is winds pushing to the north. That helps create a clockwise circulation. In the southern hemisphere, low pressure is defined by clockwise circulation. In the northern hemisphere, counterclockwise circulation. Anyway, clockwise circulation in the upper atmosphere also lends itself to clockwise circulation in the lower atmosphere, which creates winds on the ocean surface, which creates swell. Anyway, we see a little area, 120 knot winds, currently set up southeast of New Zealand. A bit of a trough here, not particularly strong, but perhaps maybe something that could help support gale formation, but it quickly washes out, and you just get this kind of a zonal flat west to east flow until about midweek, and then come about early Wednesday, a new trough, not really defined yet, starts building, associated with a pocket of 140 knot winds building here southeast of New Zealand. That trough continues to develop and actually starts looking reasonably decent come Thursday morning with 150 knot winds building. And there you go. You can get a little bit of a upper flow there that would support clockwise circulation and presumably low pressure, if not gale development down at the ocean surface, working its way out of the California swell window. That would be about 120 here, and then just sort of turning into a ridge and things settling down a little bit. And again, a zonal flow sets up, not really supportive of gale development. Winds are weak. And then towards the end of the model, we noticed another sort of a trough trying to organize here late Sunday. That'd be Sunday the 10th, here in the southeast Pacific again. Maybe supportive of gale development, but not really sure. And also an even weaker trough over here in the Tasman Sea, but just way too early to know with any certainty. Next, we take a look at surface level pressure and surface level winds. Notice high pressure over New Zealand, certainly not supportive of low pressure development, and a weak low pressure pattern here in the central and southeast Pacific, but high pressure again locked down off the coast of Chile. We put this into motion. We're looking for something, and here we go, come Monday, little area, 35, 40 knot winds, sort of pushing northeast, Building then into Monday night, notice a little patch of 55 knot winds, but a larger area, 50 knot winds, aiming pretty well to the north. This would support some sort of sea development, but then notice it sort of fades and falls south, but another area fetch, there's only 35 knot winds here, but another fetch starts developing here southeast of New Zealand with high pressure north of it. That would form a pressure gradient and help to create stronger winds than normal. And sure enough, here we go, 45, 50 knot winds, again over a very small area. 50 knot winds now come Wednesday, lifting to the northeast and aim pretty well to the northeast. And that continues into Wednesday, almost 55 knot winds by Wednesday night into Thursday. And then the thing peaks out on Thursday morning right on the hairy edge of the California swell window, really aiming more at Peru and Chile, and then moving out of the California swell window, and all the fetch starting to fall more to the east, targeting more like southern Chile, and then dissipating. We roll this on out, looking for any new development beyond that. We're into Sunday, and here we go. A little fetch is forecast Sunday, so we're a week out, the 10th. 45 knot winds aimed well to the northeast and holding, oh, there we go, 50, 55 knot winds, 174 hours out. Again, this a little bit better in the swell window, not believable, 180 hours out, but something to look at. Also of some note, we're going to get into talking about the Southern Oscillation Index. That's the difference in pressure between Darwin, Australia, and Tahiti. And this is the area that we're interested in here. Notice just sort of Tahiti's basically 149, so right here. And a little area of low pressure, I mean very weak, nothing of any interest. But watch this as we get into Tuesday, and then Tuesday midday, a solid low pressure system developing there. And then even 45 knot winds pushing north in close proximity to Tahiti. I don't know that this would be tropical, but a subtropical low in close proximity to Tahiti, 40 knot winds by Wednesday morning. This should drop the Southern Oscillation Index well negative, and then that low sort of dissipates, hangs in the area, and then finally fades out, and high pressure perhaps builds in, but it almost suggests that maybe another little bit of low pressure is going to hang in the area for a day or two. So the point being, Southern Oscillation should go negative, and we'll get more into that later. So getting back on track, let's take a look at the effect of winds on the ocean surface in the South Pacific. Notice area 20-foot seas that we pretty much wrote off before, mainly because they're not high enough they'll decay to nothing before they reach any of our prime targets. So we're just into Monday, and here we go, the first little hint of a gale. And here's the point we want to watch. Notice 30, 32-foot seas, but we're not really sure. There's something to notice here. See the little X there? We've added this to the models. Max significant wave height. We scan the entire model. We look for the max significant sea heights we can find. It lists it out, 32.5 feet, and it actually gives you the position, 58.0 south and 134 west. So rather than eyeballing it and guessing it, you can kind of see what the model's really telling you down at the individual grid space. That is, the model resolution is half a degree by half a degree grid, or squares, over the entire Earth's planet. So you can get a sense of what's going on inside of some of these areas. Still, from a forecasting perspective, one tiny area of high seas does not qualify as, sort of the average for the area, which is what we tend to use to figure out swell decay, but it gives you a peak reading nonetheless. Anyway, so Tuesday, little area of, let's say, 32-foot seas, and that is supposed to fade out a little bit, but additional fetch from the west that we saw earlier starts building, and here we go. Now we have, what, 30, 32, 34, 36? This says 36.5. Good enough. We'll go with it. Building, notice a little area of 40-foot seas, but mainly 38, 39-foot seas. And the the California cutoff is about 120, actually 117. And then we're pushing 39-foot seas on Thursday or so. And right on the edge here, 40-foot seas. 42 according to the model in one grid square there. And also notice seas, here we go, move this out of the way, seas south of Tahiti, and this is the problem with using this new, when you push the the indicator goes right over top of the seas here. But over here you can say, okay, about 22, 24, or 25-foot seas south of Tahiti. Anyway, roll that out, and higher seas pushing 45 or even 40, I would say 46. The model says 47.7, but all this now targeting southern Chile. Chile to get another pulse of swell, and a little bit closer than the last one. Still, good surf is surf. You take it any way you can get it. Anyway, that system peters out, and then we start rolling into next weekend. Not a whole lot going on. And then we get towards the end of our model run here, Sunday night, and another little fetch that we saw. What is that? 30? It says 36, but I'd say 34-foot seas, and up to 40 feet. Very tiny area, perhaps 180 hours out. Completely unbelievable, but still, it suggests a pattern of consistent, small to mid-grade surf for the future. Also, looking in the North Pacific Ocean, we're going back in time. Thursday night, Friday morning, a little gale developed in the Gulf of Alaska on Saturday. Here we go, and that was 24-foot seas, and this is on about the 300 or so degree track into Northern California. Tiny little fetch, and it held into Saturday and Saturday night up to 27-foot seas, but generally speaking 26-foot seas. Good for some swell pushing into the U.S. West Coast on, say, late Tuesday into Wednesday. But nothing significant in size. There's going to be local wind swell developing at the same time, and also southern hemi swell still hitting. So kind of a mix of swell energy expected. And then finally, looking from current time forward, here's the decayed remnants of that low on Sunday, and a new low developing. Whoops, we almost missed it. Here over the date line, 20-foot seas over a tiny area, maybe good for 3-foot at 13-second surf for the Hawaiian Islands mid to later in the week, but nothing too significant. And then things just kind of fade out. Also, a tropical storm developing in the far west Pacific, building. Its name is Noel, and it is forecast to move close to the Philippines. Normally we'd go look at the weather models, but we're just going to be lazy and go through this. Here's the point. Notice that rather than going due west, it's actually forecast to recurve, not hit land, and start, making its way free and clear into the North Pacific. This a week out. We don't believe any of it. Also notice another system behind it too. Again, none of this is believable this far out, but to have a system recurve, if it were to happen, this early in the season would be most interesting, because it would suggest that, one, the jet stream is still doing something here, and two, that the atmosphere has changed its circulation pattern in favor of a more El Nino-like pattern. We're not sure that that's really the case, but something to monitor just the same. And with that, we move to the long-term portion of our forecast. What's going on a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks out, or even 6 months from now? As best we can tell, it's hard to say. But first up, Southern Oscillation Index. Difference in pressure between Darwin, Australia, and Tahiti. Negative numbers represent El Nino, or at least the active phase of the Madden-Julian Oscillation, which supports storm development in the Northern Hemisphere in the winter months, and sometimes could be implicated with the production of storm development in the Southern Hemisphere as well. Currently, it's basically neutral, 3.60. No significant signs of long-running numbers. Not long-running negative numbers, that is. The 30-day average has been steadily coming up from -8 to -3.58 currently. The 90-day running average also coming up, -4.76. If you want it to be El Nino, this guy needs to be down at about -20 to -25 if it were to be a strong El Nino. We're nowhere near that. We're looking at weak El Nino at best per this index currently. Next, we're looking for signs of the active phase of the Madden-Julian Oscillation, or at least westerly wind bursts. Westerly wind bursts help transport warm water from the West Pacific to the East Pacific, contrary to what is normal, and are suggestive of perhaps El Nino development. Currently, westerly winds, light westerly anomalies in the Kelvin Wave generation area, which runs roughly 135 to about 170 and a couple degrees either side of the equator. Westerly winds in this area help push warm water to depth, and then that warm water makes it the whole way across to the Pacific, to the Galapagos Island, gurgling to the surface, It is what is called a Kelvin wave and helps warm surface waters off the Galapagos Islands. That is the hallmark of El Nino. Currently, we have modest westerly anomalies in the Kelvin wave generation area all the way to the dateline, and then it makes it to a point about south of Hawaii, then fades with neutral anomalies everywhere else except weak westerly anomalies approaching the Galapagos Islands. A week from now, those westerly anomalies are to build rather strong, at least at one point, supporting tropical development, and it is westerly wind bursts. When you have a really good one going, you can actually get an eddy this way that forms tropical development in the northern hemisphere, another one going this way in the southern hemisphere that forms tropical development. Pairs of typhoons or cyclones on either side of the equator are certainly a sign of a westerly wind burst in progress, and that typically happens during El Nino events that are fairly strong. We don't see that happening right now, but perhaps a little bit of secondary support for early season tropical development in the West Pacific is not out of the question, at least according to this model. Westerly anomalies make it to almost the dateline, and then weak anomalies north of the equator, and then pretty much a neutral pattern a week out the whole way to the Galapagos. So no clear indication of strong westerly wind bursts, but something to monitor. Another way to play this game is not to look at anomalies, but let's look at actual winds per the model. And certainly no trade winds. Trade winds would be blowing out of the east. We have dead westerly winds out of in the 12 to 15 knot range here in the far edge of the Kelvin wave generation area. Another little pocket here in the 10 to 12 knot range. And basically nothing that represents trades anywhere in the Kelvin wave generation area. This is a good sign. So we'll just roll this out, see how things play. Notice we see continued pockets of westerly anomalies, even building here way off to the west. And this just goes on. See how it goes. We're 60 hours into it. Notice more westerly winds associated with a typhoon development, perhaps, forecast out on Wednesday. And here we go. I mean, this is just continued. Oh, there's strong pockets to 20 knots out of the west, right in the heart of the Kelvin wave generation area on Thursday, and even, 22 knots. So it just continues. Pretty impressive, actually. And we're still into, here we go, almost Sunday. Notice trades are starting to work their way from the dateline a little bit east, and then even more so 168 hours, and then even 180 hours. But very weak trades. We're talking 5 to 7 knots or so. And still back here to the west, 12 to 14 knot westerly winds. So not even anomalies, full-on westerly winds. Looking back in time, so this is the entire planet. The far west Pacific is about here. The far east Pacific, Galapagos Islands, is here. Oranges and red, back in time, represent westerly anomalies. The blue, easterly anomalies. We see a continued pattern for the past month of westerly anomalies, right in the heart of the Kelvin wave generation area. And here we go, that forecast peak. These are shown as anomalies, but the reality is they're full-on westerly winds by the 8th of May. This is a good sign. Maybe another Kelvin wave will be supported by this westerly winds. Another interesting sign here. This is outgoing long-wave radiation. We use this to look for the presence, or the forecast. This is a 15-day forecast for the presence of the active phase of the MJO. Blues would be the active phase. Yellows would be the inactive phase. We see a dead neutral pattern. Okay, nothing going on, and basically nothing forecast for the next 15 days, this per the statistical model. And if we look at the dynamic model, it effectively says the same thing. They vary a little bit on some sort of a weak something trying to go on the Indian Ocean, but where it really matters, in the Kelvin wave generation area, absolutely nothing is forecast in terms of the MJO. The point being, if El Nino were developing, what you typically see is the MJO go into hibernation, neither active nor inactive phase, just dead neutral. And that's what both these models are projecting. That is a good sign, at least for the next 2 weeks. The upper level model, 40-day, very long running, hardly believable, but fun to look at just the same, has nothing to do with winds. It is projecting the probability of increased precipitation, greens, which are typically associated with the active phase of the MJO. So currently it's suggesting some sort of weak active signal now working its way east into about the 23rd of May, then an inactive, a drier signal, and presumably less chance for westerly anomalies from about the 13th of May on into the 1st of June, and then another active signal starting in the West Pacific working its way east. This is the way the MJ works, about 3 weeks on, 3 weeks off, starting late May and going well into June here. Next up, sea surface temperature anomalies. Differences in normal for this time of year for these locations on the planet. What we want to see is warm water building up here, specifically in sort of a triangle from here to here. And sure enough, we see that. Not super warm, but still a little bit. And notice some warm, hot spots starting to show up along the Ecuador, Peruvian coast, and near the Galapagos Islands. This is a sign of perhaps a new Kelvin wave, well, a strong Kelvin wave is starting to erupt along this area, right as expected. It was expected about May 1st. It actually started hitting maybe a couple of days earlier than that. And then we have warm water all over the equator, but not strong enough that one would say an El Nino is in progress. Also notice warm water, another pocket here building up off Japan, and all that migrating towards the east, where there is already massive amounts of above water temperatures all in this area. You wouldn't know it if you were in San Francisco. North winds along the coast there, water temperatures have dropped. It's down into the 52, 53 degree range, where it had been up into the 57, 56 degree range the whole way through the winter, and even pushing above 60 degrees in the fall of last year. Anyway, still warm. Also notice a pocket of warm water here. We had at one point thought that this was starting to migrate east. If you want real El Nino, you not only get the Kelvin waves erupting here, you also get warm water in this area starting to migrate in this direction as well. And that the collision of this surface warm and subsurface warm water is really what generates your warm pool associated with El Nino. We had thought we had saw some movement of this pocket moving to the east. It has now redeveloped back on the date line, and that does not appear to be happening now. Now here's data from the actual surface, hard buoys on the equator, the whole way across the Pacific, actual wind speeds, and notice here, it clearly depicts westerly winds, actual surface temperatures, but it's not the surface temperatures or the surface winds that are so much of concern to us. It is the anomalies, differences from normal. Warm pocket here on the equator, on the date line that we talked about before, and now warm water building over the Galapagos. Also notice 1 degree above anomalies the whole way across the Pacific on the equator. This is a good sign. Certainly we are nowhere near any kind of a La Nina pattern. We are nowhere near a neutral pattern. We are in some flavor of El Nino. We'll call it a Modoki El Nino. El Nino, sort of, but not really, because we don't see the real warming here in the far west Pacific that is typically associated with El Nino. But again, it's only May. We have a long way to go before El Nino typically materializes. If it's really going to be a big one, you'll start seeing warm water building significantly along here in June and July. So that's the time frame, and specifically towards the middle of June, the end of June, that's where we're really going to be looking to see warm water building up here. If it's just kind of ho-hum and not doing a whole lot, then that would lead us to believe we're into another Modoki El Nino fall and winter. Next up, subsurface temperature anomalies. Again, West Pacific here, East Pacific here. We're looking at depth, a cross-section of the equator down 300 meters or so. It's not the absolute temperatures that mean so much, though do notice that the 28-degree isotherm, it appears to be trying to work its way to the east some, but not anything that would suggest there's piles of warm water building up here in the East Pacific. That's what you'd want to see. But it is the anomalies, differences in normal, and notice, a Kelvin wave. This is a classic Kelvin wave. Lots of warm water. It had built up here under the date line due to westerly winds blowing, and strong westerly winds in March particularly, but really January and February too, pushing all this warm water to the east. Notice 6-degree anomalies now working themselves into the Galapagos Island area. This is, as this Kelvin wave starts gurgling to the surface, this is what we would think would cause warm water to start building on the surface and possibly help support the formation of El Nino. But because warm water is still sitting over here by the date line and not working its way in sync with the subsurface temperature anomalies, we're beginning to have some doubts as to how warm things are really going to get in the far East Pacific. Another view of this Kelvin wave suggests, now notice the difference. This one says, this image, again from the TAO buoys, see the X's here, these are actual sensors on the buoy anchor lines, suggests that all the warm water is peaking and already rushing into the Galapagos, where this model suggests that just the very tip of it is starting to hit. And this is what we think is probably more accurate. We had calculated that the first hit of the Kelvin wave, the peak of it would start in May and run through the end of June. And we suspect that's probably the case in this pocket. This last little tail here will start gurgling up in June. And that's also why we're saying that come the mid-June time frame, if we don't see significant warming on the surface there, and that's also comparing this to the big El Nino of 97, where a massive Kelvin wave did the same sort of thing, and surface temperatures started warming rapidly by mid-June over the Galapagos Islands. So if this moves on shore, we don't see a whole bunch of warming, and I mean significant warming at the surface, then again, we declare this likely a Modoki El Nino year. And finally, the T's from the Nino from the CFS version 2 model for the Nino 3.4 region. Notice completely off the charts. Water temperatures in the main Nino, this is the main area used for tracking El Nino water temperatures. Right now, on track, it's about 1 degree above normal in the May time frame, but they're suspecting as the Kelvin wave hits, water temperatures will accelerate and rise rapidly to 2.25 degrees above normal in July, and then pushing by October 2.7 degrees, and then off the chart to, let's say, 3.1 degrees by the November-ish time frame. Now, we don't believe any of this. The model did something similar, not nearly this high, last year, same time, in relation to a very similar situation with a very large Kelvin wave hitting exactly the same time last year. And, of course, El Nino did not develop. It was barely a Modoki El Nino. So we'll see what happens. That's why we have so much skepticism around a lot of this data, especially projections. And we take kind of a skeptical view of a lot of it. The reality is it isn't going to happen until you see it happening. That's why we're saying we're putting the June date as a line in the sand. If you don't see significant warming in the Galapagos by the mid-June time frame, then we're not going to believe that you're going to have a major El Nino happening, and especially after what happened last year. Yes, there's a lot more favorable pattern in play this year, a lot more warming in play earlier this year, but we're going to take the hard line and say, we'll be skeptical, prove us wrong, give us the evidence. Let's see the warm water building. The models can tease us all day long, but we've all seen the wave models and the weather models project all kinds of havoc a week out, and none of it ever materializes most of the time. The models are good. They do a great job, and they've made tremendous progress forward in modeling technology, especially 3 to 4 days out. But a week out, it's still kind of a crapshoot. And now when we're talking 3 to 4 or 5 or 6 months out, well, it's even rolling the dice more. But still, it's fun. It's a nice tease. We're going to keep our eyes on it, and we're going to keep looking and keep our fingers crossed. So for now, the big story is strong southern hemi swell smashing Puerto Escondido, working its way up into California now, expected to peak on Monday, but with solid energy, well, rideable energy, probably into Thursday, and then perhaps more southern hemi development, at least one, possibly 2 more systems developing more in the southeast Pacific, so much the same swell angle as the swell that's currently hitting. And then even perhaps a little bit of north angled swell mixed in, midweek or so. And then, of course, we're watching the tropics, a possible recurving system in the far west Pacific. Hard to believe, but not a tease just the same. So, lots to look forward to. And then, of course, the Kelvin wave, big Kelvin wave, hitting the Galapagos Islands currently. We'll see if that produces a warm pool and then gets us a kickstart towards El Nino. So lots going on, all of it in the right direction, all of it positive. We could be in La Nina. We could have no hope at all and just be groveling for anything. We're miles from that. A lot of good stuff happening. So that's it for now. Go get some waves. Have a good time. Be safe. Long period swell. Could be a bit dicey at some locations. Already pretty large in Southern California at select locations. Go have fun. We'll do this again next week. Same time, same channel. See you then. Bye.